Well, she's a wrap here in 2024. We are taking a look at the 2024 Rye Whiskies of the Year. First, I have to say a huge thank you to each and every single one of you. Whether you are new to the channel here in 2024 or a longtime supporter, again, I say thank you from the bottom of my heart. So thank you so much for all of your support and continued support here throughout the years. Without further ado, let's go ahead again and wrap up 2024 and take a look at my top 5 Rye Whiskies of the year, including a couple honorable mentions. All right, so here are a couple of honorable mentions, and the one to your far right, which is our Bardstown Blitz Rye Whiskey that we released at our event in Bardstown, Kentucky here in 2024. I didn't want to include it, on the list, obviously, because it was one of kind of our picks. I really wanted to kind of highlight the Bardstown Rye as a whole and what we did, including a lot of others. I'm excited for what it is that Bardstown is doing specifically with their Rye Whiskies. And I think it's going to be a much bigger release here or coming up in 2025. So keep your eye out for a lot of what it is that Bardstown Bourbon Company is doing. This specific Rye Whiskey, or a lot of them, or ones you may see, was finished in cherry wood as well as new oak. So amazing things that they are doing. And I just wanted to basically highlight them and what it is they're doing. Just tremendous Rye Whiskies. And then second, as you can see here, from ASW down in Atlanta, Georgia, this is their Fiddler cask-strength Rye Whiskey, basically their toasted Rye Whiskey. And again, what an absolutely delicious Rye Whiskey. And it's almost like kind of a hard Rye Whiskey to kind of describe. But when you get those kind of chocolate pecan pie, like roasted kind of pecan nuts or something along those lines with that kind of cinnamon sweetness, this thing was really all over the board, including some fruits, things like that. But what an absolutely delicious toasted Rye Whiskey. And again, this is more highlighting them as a brand. And if you can find specifically a toasted Rye Whiskey that they've released, even more power to you, because it is 100% worth a pickup. And I had some other ones on there. I kind of tossed it around whether or not this was going to be an honorable mention or kind of squeak in, but I had a few others that were in there and I wanted to limit it to 5. But there are 2 of my 2024 honorable mentions from Bardstown Bourbon Company and ASW in Atlanta, Georgia. So now, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into my top 5 Rye Whiskies of 2024. All right, to start it off, we are talking Hughes Brothers and their Belle of Bedford toasted cask-strength Rye Whiskey. What an absolutely amazing 6+ year toasted rye. And again, I think toasted and Rye Whiskey are a magical pairing. And with that flavor profile that Cyrus has, including with that toasted barrel, just does magical things. This has a heavier, richer, more kind of herbal rye that you then blend with that sweetness of the toasted barrels, which just worked magic. And it is why it had to be part of my top 5. So if you're able to find anything from Hughes Brothers or the Belle of Bedford, specifically their ryes and even their bourbons, to be honest, this specifically is one I would say you need to seek out. I think it has a slightly different profile and I absolutely loved it, and it's why it's in my top 5 and my number 5 Rye Whiskey of 2024. All right, let's go to the state of Indiana, and this time not MGP. This is coming from our friends over at Hard Truth. This is part of their kind of 2024 kind of Sweet Mash release series, but this was a specific Rye Whiskey, again, aged less than 4 years, again, at cask strength. This one was aged in cognac, sauternes, PX sherry, PX brandy, and a little hint of some French oak was thrown in there. So this is my number 4 Rye Whiskey of the year from Hard Truth. And what it is that Brian Smith and his team, Chris, everybody there, what they do is, again, I've used the term or word magic and what it is that some of these guys are able to do. And I'll say able to do with a rye whiskey that in terms of age is relatively young, but you would never have any idea that this was a sub 4-year rye whiskey. With that blend that they've got, including the PX Sherry, PX Brandy, the Sauternes, the Cognac, and the French Oak, that's a lot going on. That's a lot of blending, but it is 100% worthy of not only finding this specific rye whiskey, and they are out there. You guys you can find these things, so just kind of keep an eye out or search on their website where some of them may be, but they were here. I was actually able to pick up this bottle here in my state, in Wisconsin, so they are out there. So again, it is why this bottle from Hard Truth is my number 4 rye whiskey of 2024. Now, from the state of California, my number 3 rye whiskey of the year from Corbin Cash. This is the 1917 cask-strength Merced Rye Whiskey. And I'll tell you what, if you are into, coffee, fruit, leathers, tobacco, lots of kind of like cherry, a little bit of and I don't even know how to describe this. There's a little bit of an earthiness that it has to it. It is an explosion of different flavors that is really unlike anything else. And what it is that this is, again, this is the 1917. This just happens to be a single barrel that we did. But I'll tell you what, the 1917 cask-strength Merced Rye is an absolute beast or monster of a rye whiskey. And this guy came in at like 135.8 proof, something along those lines, and doesn't drink nearly like that, but an absolute flavor bomb. It just, everything that you would want in a rye whiskey that you may not even ultimately be familiar with is in that bottle of the 1917 cask-strength Merced Rye. It just leaves that memorable experience. There's something about it that is so different, so unique, and makes it all of those, and that all adds up to it being an absolutely delicious rye whiskey, and it's why it's my number 3 rye whiskey of 2024. All right, so we are talking my number 2 rye whiskey of the year. We are going to the state of Ohio, and this coming from our friends at Middle West Spirits. This is their cask-strength dark pumpernickel rye. And again, you're seeing a little bit of a theme here, and I'll say these slightly different, unique profiles within this rye category is what makes it maybe the most interesting whiskeys, I guess, that I've experienced. I don't kind of deal with the scotches and a lot of the American single malts, but when we're talking about rye whiskeys, I love when things start to get a little bit different. And what you get from Middle West Spirits, specifically their dark pumpernickel rye at cask strength, this thing being about 122 proof, what an absolute beast or monster. I was kind of going back and forth. I love this that much, whether or not I was going to make this my number 1 rye whiskey of the year. And I didn't, but I'll tell you what, it is worthy of a 1 and 1A. And if you can find something, again, from Middle West Spirits, specifically the cask strength dark pumpernickel rye, I would say if you've ever been on the fence or either didn't know anything about it, it is 100% worth a buy, worth trying. Take your time with this. It's going to be different, unique. Don't formulate your opinion immediately. Take your time with this because it is a little bit different and something that you need to kind of digest a little bit. It is that different and unique while all being an absolutely delicious and just an absolute beast of a rye whiskey. So that is why from Middle West Spirits, the dark pumpernickel rye at cask strength is my number 2 rye whiskey of 2024. Now let's get into this and I'll reveal my number 1 rye whiskey of 2024. All right, so here it is. I'll say this about the Jack Daniel's single barrel, barrel proof rye whiskey, and why it's my #1 rye whiskey of 2024. This was a local pickup for me, and I had a chance to try it before I bought it. And, you know, obviously that's a little bit of an advantage, and really I would suggest that to just about anybody. But what made this so different and unique were a lot of the different profiles that I kind of got. A lot of times, you know, you still get that kind of chocolate mint, but this was giving me some like Oreo cookies, a little bit of like a nutmeg, Coca-Cola was giving me just like everything it felt like under the sun. It made this as rich and complex, mouth coating, a beautiful, beautiful long finish that I'll say this about the Jack Daniel's single barrel barrel proof ryes is until someone just continuously produces something that is better than this is always going to be, I think, in my top rye whiskeys of whatever the year it may be. And this was so delicious. It made it feel like, again, I was going back and forth between this and the #2, which was the Middle West Spirits Pumpernickel, Dark Pumpernickel cask-strength rye. But just what this is on a, I don't want to say a daily basis, but when you're thinking about a true rye whiskey, this may be the perfect representation of what a higher proof cask-strength rye whiskey can be. And again, until there's someone that is just continuously doing that, it's always going to be up there. And it's why this release was my #1 rye whiskey of 2024. So there you have it. There are my honorable mentions. There were my 5 rye whiskeys of 2024. I'd love to hear from you, not only in terms of the list, but what were some of your favorite rye whiskeys in 2024? I also want to say a huge thank you to each and every one of you for watching, commenting, everything throughout the year. Again, like I had mentioned early on, whether you were new here in 2024 or have been with me from the very beginning, I can't say thank you enough for allowing me to do this and bring a lot of these videos to you guys and get a lot of the feedback and comments and overall support that I do. So also I have to say a huge thank you to the Patreon community, the supporters through Patreon who not only support the channel, but are part of the Mash and Journey Whiskey Club. I can't say thank you enough for all of your support, continued support. If that's something that you are not part of and you want to be a part of the Mash and Journey Army or support the channel in 2025, make sure you check out the Patreon link in the description below. Again, I can't say thank you enough for all of your support. I look forward to seeing and just kind of diving into what it is that 2025 has to offer. So with that being said, guys, ladies, thank you all so much for your continued support. As I had mentioned here now several times, I greatly, greatly appreciate it. And remember, it's about the journey and not the destination. Cheers, and we'll see you in 2025.